Welcome to The Way I See It. This interview is one of 6 in which I feature General Surgeon Dr. Titus Odedun. And this one looks at his ardent love for cars. He owns almost 40 cars. So this interview really seeks to find out why he loves cars so much. My first question was to ask how this love for cars began.
Well, my love of cars started very early. When just finishing my primary education in Nigeria, in Ibadan in Nigeria, just around about the age of 10, I was meant to go to a secondary school. In those days, secondary schools were not free, were mostly boarding, and I was living with my half-brother in Ibadan, which is a major town, and he was very unwilling to pay the high boarding fees compared to what he earned. And he didn't tell my parents, and he just took me by hand to his best friend. He was a motor mechanic, and he said, "This is my brother, teach him the trade." So I became an apprentice motor mechanic at a very early age. And to be honest with you, in those days I was enjoying myself. I was loving it until my mother's best friend went shopping in the local high street shops, and just by accident saw me going underneath cars, jacking up cars at that age. And he went back and said to my mother, said, "Rachel," my mother's first name is Rachel, said, "Rachel, I saw your son in a mechanic shop. Where we come from, education is very, very highly rated." And she said, "If you and your husband run out of money, why don't you tell us?" And my mother said, "I think you're seeing things. It's not my son. My son is with his brother. He hasn't even finished school yet, because I finished a bit early. He hasn't finished." The woman said, "Look, I'm not telling any fibs. I saw your son." And so my mother got changed, and they came to the city, and my mother saw me at a distance. And she just burst into tears, and just literally took me from there and frog marched me back to the village where she lived, and said, "Whatever it takes, even if I have to sell all my jewelry, you're going to high school." And that's how I went to a high school the next academic year. But the love of cars was already sown. I couldn't shake it off. During my holidays, I would stand with my little scrapbook by the sea, and as the cars go by, I will say, "Oh, that's a Chevrolet." I will write it down, the registration number down. "Oh, that's a Mercedes." So the love of cars, the seed was sown. And from that age, I just love particularly the old cars, because we're talking of the 60s now. So we're talking about what you now call classic cars, were the ones that were in vogue at the time, and I just fell in love with them. No, unfortunately, he had diabetes, and he had one leg amputated, but as things happened, after I qualified, I had to be the one looking after him as he got old age, and there's no retirement pension in Nigeria. But he didn't do so with malice. That's all he understood at the time, and I didn't take it against him. And that's what I was meant to go through, that pathway. So I retired him and helped him in his old age, because don't forget, the life expectancy in Nigeria is not high. People, by the time they get to 65, they are considered old. So he passed away, unfortunately. But he had the opportunity of seeing me, not only as a doctor, but as a specialist.
And did he see your love for cars?
Yes, he saw my love of cars, and he, in a paradoxical set of way, he was part of that love. Well, my mother was not herself very educated, because they grew up during the war, and life was hard. But she had a passion for education, and it's not just me. I have 2 sisters. She decided that all of them should be given the opportunity of education. So even my sister went to university level as well. So my mother worked extremely hard to put money together to help. And sometimes I was behind in my school fees at school. I should actually be on scholarship, but we were not prepared to bribe the ministers to get a scholarship. I should have been on scholarship because I was top of the year. But my mother, God bless her, and that's one of the reasons I created this foundation for what my mother went through, all the hardship my mother went through to make sure I was educated. So she was passionate about education, and she would sell everything she had to educate. My father played his own role as well, but my mother was instrumental, was a key figure in driving driving us with passion to get education. Well, from that time, as soon as I qualified, I bought my, while I was at school, because I came to university via the Tortoise River, Malta, because Malta was a British colony, the old Royal University of Malta. So even while I was in Malta, I had like a surrogate mother, a very passionate, very lovely lady. And she had an old car, which I drove in and out when I was doing my pre-clinicals before I moved to the UK. So that's an old Hillman car, which I drove while I was still a student, while I was doing all this part-time work, working in hotels, working everywhere. Occasionally, she lent me her car. So I was still in love with classic car. And by the time I qualified, my first car was an MG. And I bought this from Harrogate. And I just loved it. And from there, it mushroomed. Then I bought my second classic car. I got the third classic car.
What was the second one?
The second one was actually a Triumph Herald. That was my second classic car, which was quite a very nice looking car, especially at the time. I have a TR4 now. It's Triumph even now. Then after that, I bought an MG, another MG, an old 1948 MG. So then as I became more prosperous, I started buying the more expensive one, like Rolls-Royce, Bentley. That was not at the beginning, especially when I was busy investing. I couldn't go near a Bentley at that stage or a Rolls-Royce. Those came afterwards. Oh yes, I have about 40 cars. Unfortunately, it's a bug which I caught. Unfortunately, or fortunately, unfortunately, depending on which side you're looking at it from. Some of them are modern cars like Ferraris, and it's the dream of every young man to drive a Ferrari. So as I got better and my investment started to yield results, I was able to buy things like Ferrari and not only modern Rolls Royces, but vintage Rolls Royces, modern Bentleys, vintage Bentleys. So I have, Triumphs, Morgan 4+4, all sorts of vintage cars. I have some very old Morris 8, for example, which was made in 1934. My cars go back to 1926. I have a Rolls Royce, out of my Rolls Royce collection, one of them was actually built in 1926. It goes back to 1926. So those are some of a specimen of my cars. I do love these cars because I believe a lot of my cars are British. And I believe that we are custodians of a long British heritage. And the government, in fairness to the government, they do everything to encourage us to keep these classic cars going. So I not only drive them, I drive every single one of them. From depending on what weather we have and how I feel, I do drive them. But more importantly, I take them to car shows because I'm a member of the clubs. The Rolls-Royce Collectors Club, I'm a member. I'm also a member of the RAC Club. which is the premier club in London for people who are interested in cars, and we show cars there as well. But I take my cars to road shows, and to the disgust of my children, so I actually raced one of my cars in Medina Grand Prix. I went on the racetrack and raced one of my cars. And they do encourage us to go on the racetrack, even here in the UK, to put them through their paces on car shows. Well, these cars are because every car comes with a history. And when you're interested in these cars, you go to the history. The Rolls-Royce that I told you about, 1926, was first purchased by Stanley Ritson in Sunderland in 1926. In those days, Rolls-Royce, which incidentally was formed by two people who met in a train, Rolls and Royce. There were an engineer and a businessman, and they formed the Rolls-Royce company, which is there till this day. They met and they formed this company. And so each car comes with a history. That car was bought in, I think it was built by Rolls-Royce, and the coach makers, Barker, made the coach of the car, and Stanley Ritson ordered it and was delivered to him in April 1926. So I know the history of the car, and it stayed there, and then it went from there after about 20 years to County Durham. A Dr. Catherine Hennigan was the second owner of the car. And the car finally found its way to London and became the Lord Mayor's car in London, believe it or not. That Rolls was the Lord Mayor's car in London up to the late 70s when they sold some of their assets. So each of these cars come with a unique history, and it is part of the beauty of the car to have the history of the car. So I try to learn as much as possible of every single car I have, including their previous owners, what they did. One of my cars belonged to the Sultan of Brunei. One of my Rolls-Royce, one of my Ferraris, my Maranello, belonged to Sultan of Brunei, and it was the Sultan bought it from here, had it taken to Brunei, and flew an engineer here from the UK to look after that car meticulously, just to service the car. I sent a private plane to get an engineer from England to Brunei to service the car. So the car has been well looked after. Another car that I have, it was one of my Aston Martins, was one of the badly behaved royals, which I shouldn't go into, but it used to be his car. And I got it from Kensington, and it comes with a history that this car belonged to Prince XYZ, who, for confidential reasons, I shouldn't mention names, but it used to belong to one of the princes. So each of these cars come with a unique history, and it's nice to know the previous owners of those cars, and it's interesting as well. It's a good hobby because it makes you relax. I do get in my overalls and take the plugs out and play with the cars now and again when I've got a free time, because it's therapeutic. It's relaxing. I have names of some of them, some of the older cars, because I acquired these cars because from my childhood I love cars, not because I want to show off. In fact, I don't drive my Ferraris as often as I should, because people think, oh, you're trying to show off. No, I acquired them because I actually am passionate to the core about these cars, particularly the vintage ones. So each of them comes with a character, and they do have names as well, and I look after them as if they are important. Oh, my Aston Martin is called Ruth. Yes, and
why is it called Ruth?
Well, it reminds me of somebody that I used to know, and there's some features about the car which bring that to mind. There's one called Martin, again, because I had a friend called Martin many years ago who liked that particular color. They all bring memories flushing back, if you like, each of them. Yes. Classic cars, as I said, Contrary to what people think, they are not as difficult to maintain because you have the clubs, and the clubs is a brotherhood. We help each other. And they are wise investments, especially at a time when it's difficult to get investments because everything now, the economy is in doldrums. And so I have advised quite a few of my friends to look at selected classic and vintage cars and try to buy them. I was advising people about Aston Martin DB7, for example. The prices have been falling in recent years. And it's a good time for somebody perhaps to buy Aston Martins, because if somebody had an Aston Martin DB5 15 years ago, which is not a long time ago, you could get one for perhaps £85,000. Just 15 years later, you need £1 million to get the same car. Which investment, even if you buy a property in Chelsea, or Knightsbridge, it doesn't grow that well. Yes, properties do hold value and double and triple in prices, but something you bought for 85,000, people will say to me, 85,000 15 years ago was a lot of money. Yes, I do agree, but as an investment, they are very valuable investment, even especially from the tax point of view.
Thanks for watching. You might get the car bug too. But whatever you are passionate about doing, do enjoy it. Be inspired. See you next time on The Way I See It.